Hello and welcome to the review session for 55c from chapter 55, and this is part C, where we pick up with the battle as it's going on in Greece. Caesar has followed Pompey and his forces to the mainland of Greece, and Pompey, avoiding conflict, has protracted the engagement beyond the original loss that Caesar suffered at Dyrrhachium, hoping to exhaust Caesar's troops. So we find Caesar apud Paleo Pharsalum, near Paleo Pharsalus, which is accusative singular and feminine, or masculine, in Thessalia, and that's the ablative singular and feminine, with the copiis productiis, with the whole force having been brought out. And this is an ablative absolute with a perfect passive participle in agreement with your noun, both of which are in the ablative. We also have another adjective modifying it, ingentibus, with a huge force having been brought out. So both are modifying copiis. And then we find that both are engaged in the dimikaweron, both are fighting. So then, in Thessaly, near Paleo Pharsalus, with the whole army having been brought out, the whole huge army, utrimque, on both sides, they fought. And that's perfect tense, active voice, indicative mood. Next sentence starts with our subject, the second word here, acies, which is nominative singular feminine. The battle lines, habuet, they had, and it's the battle lines Pompeii, the battle lines of Pompeii, had quadraginta milia, 40,000 of foot soldiers. And remember, foot soldiers here is genitive, specifying the 1,000, which is the object of habuet. Quadraginta here is undeclinable, but milia is your object. That's foot soldiers that he has, 40,000. And then equites, accusative plural masculine, sexquecentos, or sexcentos. That's 600 horse soldiers in sinestru cornu on the left side, and quingentos, that's 500 on the right. And then further, auxiliary, beyond that, totius orientis, of the whole Orient. So of the East, of the whole East, the auxiliaries. So to put it all together, the battle lines of Pompeii had 40,000 of the foot soldiers. They had 600 cavalry on the left side and 500 on the right. And beyond that, the auxiliaries of the whole East. But it goes on, there's even more. The totam nobilitatem, the whole of the nobility, innumerable senators, praetors, consuls, and those who, and so we have a relative clause here, who were, and since this is subjunctive, it lets us know that this is telling us that this is the sort who were. So, who were victors already of great wars. So the relative clause of characteristic lets us know that fuissent is in a relative clause that tells us not just that these were the victors of great wars, but they were of the sort that were the victors of great wars. Then we move on to find that Caesar, nominative singular masculine, our subject, had in Akie Sua, in his battle line, non integra triginta, not whole, non integra triginta, 30,000 peditun of the foot soldiers, and 1,000 of the horse soldiers. So Caesar had in his battle lines not even 30,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 horse soldiers. Then we get an adverb introducing our next sentence, numquam, never before. And then we have to look down here for our verb, convenerant, which is third person, plural, pluperfect, active, indicative. Never before, and now we need a plural subject, which we find with copiae, and which is modified by Romani. Never before had the Roman forces come together in unum, into one. And then we get this qualified, neither greater nor with better, ablative plural masculine, modifying ducibus general. Never before had the Roman army come together into one, either more or with better generals. And then this part here belongs with our subordinate clause, which is here introduced by C. The next clause begins with the C right here. It's an if clause. And the rest of this has to be understood with it. And if these had been led, and here this is third person plural, imperfect, passive, and subjunctive. So this is what's called a contrary to fact condition. The C makes it condition, and this makes it contrary to fact, that it didn't happen. And if these had been led against the barbarians, they would have subdued the whole globe of the world easily. So to put it all together, never before had the Roman army come together into one, neither more nor better, with better generals. And if it would have been led against the barbarians, the whole of the earth it would have subdued easily. Our next passage is pretty straightforward. Pugnatum est is impersonal. It's third person, perfect tense, passive voice, and indicative. It was fought in Genti in a huge contentione, in a huge conflict. And then note our subject changes from impersonal to third person, perfect tense, passive voice, and indicative mood. And we need a new subject, which is Pompey. Pompey was conquered ad postremum, at last, and the camp was sacked, his camp. So it was fought in a huge contention, and Pompey, at last, was conquered, and his camp was sacked. He himself, and that's restating Pompey, having fled, he sought, or he headed for, Alexandria. So that's third person singular, perfect tense, active voice, and indicative. With the result that, or for the purpose that, he might receive, and this is subjunctive, so that lets you know that this is a purpose clause, so that he might receive auxilia, help, from the king of Egypt, to whom he had been given, and that's third person pluperfect passive indicative, by the Senate, ablative of means, as a tutor, on account of the young age of that one. So to put it all together, he himself, having fled, sought Egypt, so that he might receive help from the king of Egypt, to whom he had been given by the Senate as a tutor. And tutor here is renaming the subject, so it stands as in a positive, on account of the immature age of that one. And now our conclusion. Who, and that's renaming our subject, but this is here referring to the king of Egypt, who, having followed, and that's modifying qui, who, having followed, and this is a particular kind of a qui, it's called a connective relative, and it means not just who, but and this one. So we could say both who, and or we could say and he, having followed fortune more than friendship, he killed, third person singular, perfect tense, active voice, indicative mood, he killed Pompey. And he sent, third person singular, perfect tense, active voice, indicative mood, the head of him, his head, i.e. Pompey's head, and his ring to Caesar, dative indirect object. The reason we know this is a connective relative is because we have a period here, a period here. The existence of the connective relative implies a judgment on behalf of the author, and the editor. The editor, because he's interpreting this as not a full relative clause on its own. So that's why we call it a connective relative. But here we have a real relative clause. And with this having been caught sight of, and here quo conspectu, both in the ablative, indicates an ablative absolute. Caesar, subject, was said, or is said, this is the historical present, so it's third person singular present tense, indicative. And then we have an accusative and infinitive construction here, fudice, to have poured out tears. Caesar even was said to have poured out tears. And then this modifies Caesar, which is nominative singular masculine, looking upon the head of such a man, genitive singular, and of his own sort once, recalling for us that Pompey was not just a great man to Caesar, but was at one point his son-in-law.